Okay, Georgy, thanks for joining me for this conversation.
My pleasure, and I'm very happy.
I'm excited too. Perhaps just a quick introduction, as I first time heard of Georgy Mamedov when you co-organized the Central Asian Pavilion, which was a year ago, I believe, in the context of the Venice Biennale in 2011. But really, I thought I met you when I was in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan and went to this memorable opening of Stab, an institution you established as a school of theory and activism in Bishkek. And I was really impressed by the manifesto that you and your colleague Oksana recited during the opening. It was an extraordinarily provocative moment, quite interesting, and to a great extent kind of overlapping with my interest in the question what to do with art today. And maybe we could run quickly through a couple of ideas in the manifesto. I have it here with me in the little publication you issued on this occasion, School of Theory and Activism in Bishkek. And then you talk about the world we live in that is, I quote, full of art, but this doesn't make it better, free and fair. Maybe you want to start from this kind of basic statement, which is quite powerful, but has quite serious consequences as to how come this world is filled with art, but it's not making it any better, free and fair. So maybe just start from this basic statement and tell me where it comes from conceptually. What interests you in art, and what is it that needs to be done, if you think, to start from in the school itself?
Yeah, I mean, of course, when we say it's full of art, it means that we don't only mean that everyone is artist, as we would understand that, participating in the Biennale or I don't know, in some exhibitions. It also means that that the system that we work really employs this artistic individualism as a mode of existence and promotes it, like being free, like have a freelance job, for instance, not to depend on working hours, having boss, etc. So this kind of artistic bohemian mode of life that we know since the 19th century is being promoted as the one that is contemporary in this creative economy. So and we have a lot of production, creative production. Everyone thinks of himself or herself as a kind of artist. And of course, the contemporary art as industry has also grown enormously for the last 20 years. So this quite basic assumption that yes, we do have a lot of art around us. We do have a lot of produced visual culture around us. We are all involved in some creative processes through the social networks. Many of us take photos, upload them on the Facebook. So there is a lot of art in this sense, in this instance. There is a lot of creativity, but does it make our world better? Does it make it freer and fairer? That's the question we wanted to pose. So because I think that we are in art. We have a obsessive belief that art can save the world, and art makes the world better just by the fact of its existence, by the fact of its being. But that's not so obvious to me or to us, and we wanted to question that because we believe in art in this sense. We think it can make change, but not just by the fact of its being.
But this. Aren't there two lines of thought involved in what you said? So on one hand, you say presence of so much art around us does not empower us. It empowers a couple of individuals in terms of their careers, maybe their bank accounts, etc., etc. But at the same time, you say everybody is an artist to an extent. Isn't that an ideal you work towards? And this basic idea of democratization of art, you mentioned social network, and the fact social networks and that everybody has access to means of production of art, something that would in the past be exclusively available to artists, making images, editing, distributing, etc., etc. So that's not the ideal you look for. So this idea of democratization of art is not what you're looking for.
Yes and no. I mean...
So explain,
yeah,
how yes and how no.
Yes, how yes and how no. I think that we have, there was a question whether we have to be fine or brutal. I don't know, maybe I have to obtain a little bit of brutality. Yeah. Because this is what we actually keep thinking and discussing, for instance, with my colleague about, okay, everyone is an artist, every man is an artist, as Joseph Boy said, yes, everyone can take photograph.
So that would be utopia realized?
And not, because when you start thinking about this, think about people living in China or in slums of India. Do they have access to the internet? Do they have an account on the Facebook? Do they have a digital camera? That's not, I think that we have to keep the geographical aspect in mind. We have to understand that, okay, what we have in the West and in inner Wests, in developing countries, in the developing world, is not the entire world on its own, It's just maybe a glimpse of utopia, but what will this utopia cost us, This is what we talk. I mean, do we count the energy that we consume by consuming the internet and using the Facebook and having our Facebook page open all the day? Do we just think about that? Can we imagine that 1 billion people or 1 billion people, 1,200,000,000 people in India and 1,500,000,000 people in China would immediately start using the internet on the same level that is used here? Would the Earth with all its resources take it? I mean, I'm not an economist, or geographer to give a precise answer, but that's something that I'm concerned with. So I don't really share that enthusiasm about social networks that, yes, finally, postmodernism in its got practical, that everyone became a subject, and so we don't have any strong subject anymore. I think that it's illusionary to a great extent. That's on the one thing, but on the other, if we look closer at the social networks and see how they function, we understand that, okay, they exploit certain concepts of freedom, concepts of friendship, of access, but there is also a serious commercial machinery behind that generates wealth for certain people. Yeah, and I don't know, maybe I can, again, going brutal, can just employ one thing. For instance, if you look at not a social network like Facebook, but if you look at the dating services, for instance, it's also kind of social networks, you would understand that they run completely on the commercial basis, where you have to pay for every step you want to do, So in this, what can we be sure that Facebook or Twitter would not go so commercial at a certain extent, and then we will have again the reproduction of hierarchies and segregation.
I think it's happening. I think what's happened with Facebook is a clear neoliberal takeover of the concept of friendship and etc. But I want to return to the question of an ideal, because what is your ideal when you talk about art? And maybe we need to make one step back and look at what your points of reference are actually historically. So it's historical avant-garde of the 1920s.
Yes.
And probably situationists in the 1960s, partially.
Mm-hmm.
How are these your points of reference historically when you talk about empowerment through art?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Historical avant-garde of the 1920s. What we call or the productive art, or applied art, utilized art. I don't know what's exact what it would be in English. The art that sought itself as an instrument of producing new life, but very conscious. you know, because I don't think that in case of new media and Facebook, we can always, there is always conscious presence of, you know, someone using it, being an artist and producing certain life, you know, that's also the point. So yes, the reference to the 1920s avant-garde is actually very ambivalent to us. It is inspiring experience of people believing that they're changing the world, or they're building the new world, and that the art is one of the most important instruments to build this reality, which would and that the whole existence of art, the whole meaning of art, is subordinate to this idea of building a new reality, as they saw fair and bright and equal, egalitarian. But so this is inspiring, but on the other hand, this project failed, you know, and that's legacy is also present, you know. This failure is something that I think in art or in any reference to avant-garde, we always have to bear in mind that that's also something that is the reason of a melancholia that you know you can't avoid. So for us the question is, okay, how can we not just copy or take something from there? You know, what is more important is to think how it functioned then. What was the problem? What was probably the reason of failure? And is that legacy can be somehow productive for us today?
And what's your answer? Can it be transported into the current circumstances, and then how?
I don't think it should be really transported. It should be rethought in the current circumstances as a kind of reference, as a kind of on both practical and pragmatic and also pathetic level as well, you know, because people have this belief, you know, this is what we lack most of the time, is that we have this belief that we don't have that passion that they had. And of course they had a different reason for that, you know, because it was much of easier choice for them just to support the whole big process that was going on, big project, you know, big agency, which was the party and the Bolsheviks state, just to say, yes, we want to support this agency, we want to be part of it, you know. But we don't have this opportunity to say, okay, we want to join some, you know, much bigger project that we want to be part of, you know. Because there is no such doesn't exist unless it's capitalism, you know, as such. So that makes, I think, a problem to transport it. So it's not possible to transport, but it's possible to learn from them. Also because I think that was like 1920s and 1930s was probably the last period of the 20th century when we had the period of when that process of thinking the world otherwise and making some practical steps to create this world were undertaken. Because then I think our imaginative power was somehow paralyzed or was channeled towards the individualism and, you know, kind of imagining private life in a different way, which ended up with 1968 in Europe. But when we talk about collective imagination, that was the last, I think, the last productive period in terms of ideas, concepts, and also forms. So getting back to that period is actually trying to make the connection, trying to re-actualize or actualize in our given circumstances certain potentials of art and ways of thinking that art had at that time. Now, but not to repeat. That would be absolutely counterproductive and I don't know, dogmatic. Just to.
But then art in this concept is clearly a bridge to something else.
Oh yeah.
So why not to drop it?
To drop art. I mean, to drop and do what?
I don't know. That's my question.
You know, it's I think I think this is the question that can only be raised in art, to drop art. I don't think that in any other sphere people would say to drop science or to drop politics.
That would be cool.
Yeah, it's just us who think, okay, let's drop art.
That's a good point.
Yeah, but let's think what will happen. I mean, we drop art, and so what? I mean, we because we say, okay, we start doing something which is not art, or we move to somewhere else. We move, but then where? Because this is what I also think. Okay, if we drop art, then we have to change our expertise and to change this, the territory. But if anything was better than art, wouldn't we live in a different world? No, I mean, if we had the better activism, the better politics, the better science, the better theory, then probably we would have a better world. But we don't. So dropping art is not an option. It's actually also counterproductive to drop art. And I want to ask this question. I think this is what we have to drop: is obsession of art with art. I think this has to be dropped. Why do we always, I thought yesterday, okay, imagine a surgeon who before making a surgery and before making a card would think, okay, if the line of that card would change the whole understanding of medicine, would he be able to, I'm sorry, I'm going to brutal, this way, and vulgar maybe, yeah? But why do we always ask the question, okay, or we have to question art, I don't think we should stop questioning art. We should stop being obsessed with art. We should just take it as it is and be in a sense pragmatic. Because this is a heavy modernist legacy, challenging art and questioning art, that we probably have to reconsider. Because this paralyzes many of our potentials.
I'm quite aware I'm provoking, because the very first sentence of your manifesto starts with, art is our native language, as it is the language we think and speaking. And it struck me within the current discussions you hear a lot, we need to rethink the field entirely and move beyond. While you don't do this, you just want to very specifically stay with the language of art. But then you need to admit that there are different understandings of the notion of art. But I think you answered that question with when saying that we should drop art's obsession with itself, but definitely maintain that particular field that allows us to move about certain things differently than any other field would actually permit.
Yes.
Do I summarize it well?
Yes. Yes, because let's contemplate here a little bit in a brutal way. I mean, imagine we're stopping. We don't do art anymore. So what should we do? We go to politics, and then you enter the same world with competition. So does politics will accommodate us, or that will activists, or I don't know, charity or international aid fields accommodate us? Do we have enough competencies to join these fields? No, that's actually, to me, this question of dropping art is absolutely not pragmatic.
Viable, yeah.
And also about the language of and the understandings of art. I think that if we drop the obsession with art, I think it will allow us to use this language in the most flexible and forceful way. Because I don't think that any particular format or medium of art has to be given up. Anything can be used in different circumstances, and we have to develop this cautious. Okay, what we should use. I mean, an exhibition can be forceful in certain circumstances, and not exhibition, but discussion or giving creating a discursive platform would be forceful and different in other circumstances. So we don't have to fight against mediums. We just don't have to fetishize it, you know.
Yeah, but I think one cannot conclude this discussion by saying we should not drop art, because, I mean, what is it when we talk about art? It's accumulation of so many different protocols, and I don't believe you want to maintain them all. Isn't that you advocate a particular way of practicing art against another way of practicing art? I mean, the word is so elastic and so filled with so many different meanings.
But this is what you said about that art is always a bridge to something, you know. So this
That's
is
my view, but there are so many people who would disagree.
But why? I'm sorry again for being vulgar or brutal. Why do we have to care about disagreement of people? You know, why do we have to care about, again, because
I'm not suggesting we need to care about it. What I'm suggesting that we, in order to have this conversation, have to be clear what is it that we talk about. And for that matter, one needs to provide some sort of definition, some kind of orientation, point of orientation.
Yes, no, I agree. But why do we have to be paralyzed by this question? You know what I mean? We have to. I think this is what we have to. Okay, if we go further, what we have to drop, if not to drop art, yeah, we have to drop this expectation of. I think there are certain lessons that we have to learn from post-structuralism and postmodernism. Yeah, I think we have to drop the expectation of the bigger narrative, you know, of a overwhelming, all-comprising definition, you know.
But then we drop this postmodernism.
We drop, but this is what we say. Okay, let's define art. What is art? You know, what kind of protocol should we choose? Okay, that's a good question. We have to, you know, we have to overcome certain, as Rogov put it, epistemological crisis concerning the art. You know, that we cannot basically define the field that we do because it's so diverse. You know, but why can't we do it on the way?
We can.
Yeah.
Maybe we can.
Why we just, you know, we keep going and picking and seeing what protocols work for us and what don't, what are forceful and what are not, what are progressive and which are reactionary, which are emancipatory and which are inhibitory. You know, why we can't do it on the way, not being stuck in the sense, okay, we can't move further before we really define what art is. What, you know, it's this is what I call obsession with, you know, art's obsession of art with itself. You know, this constant questioning. But I think if we just employ that, because art is okay. We can also think of art as a set of skills, competencies, you know, practices, as you said, protocols. But also if we go even, you know, in more details. So why don't we employ all these competencies and skills in different circumstances and see which of them work and which of them don't, and then at some point we would define.
But Georgy, if you say which of them work, which of them don't, I mean, we need to be realistic. We operate in certain contexts, not in a vacuum. That context is precisely given by contemporary state of capitalism, etc., etc. So it's not that we can just go and try freestyle what works for us, because the context is much more complex and larger. How do we go ahead if we're not able to find a language where we articulate what is it precisely that we're doing, what is it precisely that we believe in? So there's some sort of intuitive understanding there. But how can we collaborate if we don't articulate those positions respectively? So again, I don't think you can just go without thinking and try things out. I think it needs kind of hand-in-hand constellation of very careful articulations, negotiations, and in parallel moving. So I don't think one can go without the other. Because then, such basic thing as establishing an art institution requires, you know, understanding what are the goals, missions. Do we find funders who sign underneath those goals and missions? Do you have people who are at all interested in this? And then you can communicate only by articulating certain stance, certain position. And through that, directly or indirectly, you articulate what do you believe art actually is. You cannot just say, here I am and I'm doing something and I'm going to try it out. And there's a quite clear articulation here actually. So I don't know whether that's necessarily an obsession, what I'm trying to do here. When I try to kind of pull out an understanding, or your understanding of the notion of art.
I mean, I don't know, maybe I put it in that very simplistic way, but of course I mean, I'm quite aware about the context and all this, the situation we operate in. That's why I also say that we cannot drop art, because then it comes to down to that practical question: who is going to fund it? Because the people who fund art. What kind of funding you would be qualified for? That's very practical and very reasonable question, I think. But what I mean by saying that we have to. First of all, I don't think that there is something bad about kind of intuitive knowledge about this, because I think there is a certain consensus that is shared by a respectively large group of people that make us cooperate. For instance, you and I, we met because I think we share the same concerns. So there is a certain consensus between us. I don't know whether about the notion of art or about the question that the notion of art need to be, questioned and answered. Yeah. So, and this consensus can actually, be our driving force. I admit that we have the problem of the language, let's say in a broad understanding of it, which doesn't allow us to express that concern in a well-articulated way on the level of form, not only on the level of language, for instance, because to write a manifesto is an important step, but it's not enough. It's just, again, to express that you have a concern. But then how do you translate that concern into program or into project?
Sort of practice.
Yeah, that's, I think, the question. But that's already, to me, a big step. That yes, there are people and groups and institutions internationally that share this concern and aware that there has to be a next step, the translation of the concern into certain program, project, or practice, and this is how we should go about that.
So how do you do it? Because it's a literally school of theory and activism. So how does such school look like?
Yeah, but the school, we don't understand that it's an educational institution. School, it's more like a school of thought, or school as a practice, actually. Yeah, and it's a broad understanding rather than teaching, learning. And theory and activism, I think it was important to bring these two terrains together, because we believe that activism should be critical and self-critical and informed, while the theory should be translatable into praxis immediately, in a way, So we wanted to sustain this connection, that thought and practice go together in one place, in one location, physically, and what we try to do is, because we are, let's say, our language is rather art and theory than activism and praxis in this sense. So we try to cooperate with existing activist groups. So we try to create the territory of solidarity, as we call it, where this conjunction can actually happen. So where we can actually practice the solidarity and share skills, and by that empower each other. So it's I think that when it comes to the question what but certain pragmatic aspects of function of looking back in the 1920s and 1930s avant-garde with 1920s and thinking how it can function today, to me one of the ways is that art and artists with all their potential join a certain struggle that is already going on. But join in a, I don't know how to put it in English, in a way that they are not next to it, but in a way that they are within this struggle.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So when it's not that okay, it's a complete solidarity. I can't really formulate it in English. I forgot this word, but this is what I mean. That we want to be within certain struggle, with the people who struggle, but we want to be one of them, with keeping our skills and competences, because we think they can empower their struggle, not giving up on them.
And the skills competencies
being artistic skills and competencies, that's quite basic, from producing images to producing imagination as a form of thinking, to theoretical, meaning producing discourse and producing text, to production, meaning to produce events and context and situations, things like that.
Question is, which struggle one joins?
I don't think I think we are deprived from the luxury to choose at the moment. We have to go on in every local situation and context. For instance, we in Kyrgyzstan we're looking for the groups that want to change or want to see the world otherwise, even though that struggle is driven by certain contextual, situational interest or problems. For instance, we do practice solidarity with the LGBT activism in Kyrgyzstan. So, because we think that this group has been struggling for 10 years in Kyrgyzstan, and in a quite forceful way, and we think that we can be helpful, and our union, let's say, would be maybe a further step in that struggle. We want to practice solidarity with trade unions in concerning the labor rights. So we are also very concerned with the women issues in Kyrgyzstan. So we are also trying to find connections with those groups. So it's like that,
Georgy, is the struggle always localized? I mean, that's what you suggested in the beginning of our conversation somehow, but could one not see some sort of universal dimension of that struggle?
No, there is.
Justice, equality and freedom?
But there is, but it means, when I'm saying that struggle is localized, it again coming down to a very practical way,
okay.
Who to join and who to work with, But I think that exactly that, in case of that, this is also part of our competence to make that struggle that is run by local groups more universal.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Because I think I'm also now tending to think art in a very pragmatic aspect, an aspect of network, connection, exposure, resources that the art as an international industry offers. So, and of course, art with its everlasting claim for universality.
Mm.
So, I think this part of that's why we are pragmatic, but we also employ imagination. So when I believe that if we join certain struggle, we help this. I don't want to talk in this terms of help or not help. I really, this is what I wanted to say. Yeah, it's tricky, but I think that I would rather say that employment of art or accommodation of art within the struggle can make it universal or universalize it or reveal the universal dimensions in it.
What struck me now that you mentioned Kyrgyzstan and concrete struggles on the ground, so to speak, back in your manifesto, you refer to Central Asia as the third world. Explain.
Explain.
I mean, part of Soviet Union was certainly part of the second world. How did you make it into the third world?
Yeah, that's. I mean,
it's a loaded vocabulary you're using, and it really struck me. How come that you refer to Central Asia, in particular Kyrgyzstan, as the third world? And you basically talk about, I can just quote from this, today when due to the economic crisis, the global capitalist system takes more and more cynical moves in its pursuit to preserve the status quo and to make the rich even richer and the poor even poorer, when the countries and regions like Central Asia are doomed for the eternal position of the third world, eternal position, and the peoples of these countries are exclusively seen as oppressed and almost free labor force, it is obvious that the language common and familiar to us, the language of theory and art, cannot be longer our private and personal language. So it reflects the discussion we just had about joining the struggles. But this third world, explain.
Okay, of course we play here with the, as you said, with the loaded language. It's clear that the world was divided by ideological view, yeah. But it was always meant a certain economical situation, yeah. And the reference to the third world would be the reference to the poorest countries of the world in Africa and in Asia, yeah. And Central Asia after the 1989 found itself in a very interesting situation. So the way we know Central Asia now, it's going to be probably quite a long thread of thought here, because I don't think it's quite easy to talk about that, to explain even that simple sentence, because and that also, I will go step by step here,
Mm-hmm.
So it is the reference of the avant-garde of 1920s. It is also justified, or the interest of Stadt in this is also justified of the particular situation of Central Asia, because Central Asia was created, projected, as we know it now, in 1920s and 19th, so it's between 1924 and 1939, so to say. So what I mean is that the economic, political, and geopolitical structure of Central Asia, so its borders, its capitals, its national identities, everything was created within this period of time. And Central Asia, as such, was part of that global project of building a new world, and that's an immediate result of this project.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in a way a very radical manifestation of the of shaping the world that took place in the early Soviet years, because we never knew. Because these places like Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, these names even didn't exist before 1920s, and nations didn't exist as such. There were completely different set of identities, a completely different way of thinking themselves, moving within the region. There were completely different borders, So to think more about that, about 1920s in the context of Central Asia, is very important to understand what it is now and where should it go. You see, we have, in case of the Soviet project in Central Asia, it's a very, very big ambiguity or even contradiction, So Central Asia and its people were completely objectified towards the, Bolsheviks' colonial power, And this is one way to think Central Asia. But on the other hand, the way the things happened and the way people thought at that time, they were equal subjects of this process,
Mm-hmm.
of this constructive process. you know what I mean. Even on the discursive level, on the level of rhetoric, it was never colonial. It was all Soviet people building their new lives, and everyone was equal and involved. So, in this sense, the Soviet project to Central Asia has its two very important aspects. The colonial and projected, and emancipatory, and basically it connects the modern Central Asia to the contemporary world. This is what you say. It's part of the second world. I think it's because of that you and I speak here English and talking about art. It's just because this is the inertia connection of Central Asia being part of the Soviet project. But what happened in 1989, it completely changed the positioning of these countries and of this region and its people in the world, because economically, at least countries that lack natural resources like Tajikistan or Kyrgyzstan cannot sustain the infrastructure physically, and they're descending in extreme poverty, in extreme devastation of infrastructure. So these are already third world countries in this sense, if you judge by the life standards of people, So here, I think I'm losing myself because it's something very important for us, and in connection to the 1920s, is basically to return to the second world, from the position of the third world, is to basically to make out of this ambiguity, to make the choice, okay, whether we want to go on this post-colonial trajectory and be still objectified now as objects of post-colonial studies and reflection, which is not constructive, which is only deconstructive, or whether we have to make a strong, responsible, and in a way radical choice to say, no, we accept all that Soviet legacy with all its problems and achievements, as the legacy of thinking the world otherwise, with, we being part of the global leftist socialist project, and this is the way we are connected to the world, through that legacy, through that past, and through that future, and that's why we want to return to the 1920s and 1930s to understand again how these countries and regions were, and that how they were constructed,
envisioned at
that time, where we are now, and how can we, not undermining the trauma, the colonial aspects, but rather understanding them, but making our trauma productive, put it this way. Yes, we didn't want to be colonized. Probably we didn't want here in Central Asia to build socialism. But we had been doing that. That happened to us. Let's not negate it, not neglect it. How can we make it productive for us today? Because we think that that's actually our future in the past, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah. It's complex thought, but that's how I always view this, right? The part of the historical legacy being part of the Second World. But when you 20 years after the political change recharge this old term of Third World, I don't know whether this brings us further or backwards in a way. Like why to use this terminology?
The Third World.
Of the Third World, because it does not necessarily indicate the poverty only, as you suggest. Huh?
But it indicates not only poverty, but it also indicates the place of Central Asia in the world intellectually, let's say, not only economically, but also on different levels. I think it was quite fair to mention that, quite fair to the people who live in Central Asia.
But how intellectually? What does this mean?
It means that that Central Asia or any particular country is not part of current intellectual discourses that concern the new shape of the world.
But then it would mean that you assume that still is the first world, this first league of intellectual, economic, political.
Oh yes.
So you do assume that.
I think.
What is it? The West.
The West, which is growing forward, which is becoming forward in many others, not only in those aspects that you probably meant when the project started, in others as well. That it's called, with this crisis, it's forward to the compared to the years of flourishing neoliberalism. But it's still, and I don't think we have to, I think we have to be very, very cautious and aware of the privileged situations we find ourselves. That yes, being in the West, it's different than being in whatever you call it, global South or the East. It's yes, we have. Whatever changes are happening, this situation with the West being the leading, but even that simple fact that we speak English, to me that's important. And yes, maybe in 20 years that wouldn't be efficient anymore, and we would have to speak Chinese. But now we speak English. So basically, for instance, when talking about contemporary art, I always hear from, or there is such a discourse that okay, that's an important import project for Central Asia.
Contemporary art
as
imported from the West.
From the West, yeah.
So how do you view it?
But this is exactly what I think that kind of work that has to be undertaken. Yes, is to change the situation of the third world, where things like contemporary art would be viewed as imported, yeah, to we call it Second World War. Second World is to claim your right for this legacy. For instance, of course, to me, contemporary art is not an imported project. It's authentic Central Asian project the way it is now, because there were practices, avant-gardist practices of 1920s and 1930s that were linked with the international context. Mm-hmm. Then there was a Soviet variant of the modernist art system, yeah, with its education, artist unions, socialist traditions, and all the oppositions to it. And then there was contemporary art, because the artists who practiced it and theorists and critics who wrote about that, they got education in the Soviet Union. And that was their connection with the with the world. So it's not at all a legacy that was, or a project that was brought from the West, but because I think that our memory was shortened in the 90s. We tend to connect things just with something that happened 1 year ago. Mm-hmm. So we connect contemporary art with Soros Foundation, so to say, one of the big funders, yeah, in the 90s, but we don't articulate and accentuate those other links, which basically make our position more steady, but also more powerful, that connect us, that connect Central Asia to the world. That's important. That move us from the position of the third world to the second. So, as I said, to me, the fact that we speak English here in the Netherlands, you being from Slovakia, me being from Central Asia, let's say, is more the legacy of the Soviet project rather than the 20 years after.
Okay. And how this is complex for me. I would much rather see the divisions of first, second, and third world going down the history was 1989, right? It's and for me this is relatively complicated. If from this second world legacy you claim you kind of fallen down in the ladder in a way, I found that relatively problematic, indeed. But still, I want to look at how this has been reflected by the artistic practices. I know this can be terrible generalization, but I would want to look at last 20 years. That's really something that interests me. Maybe before 89, so sometime around 1986 with Gorbachev's perestroika. I think that's where you locate kind of beginning of relatively radical shift on the art scene. Is that how you can view it? Like, how have artists reflected these political changes? Maybe there is a concrete artwork you would want to talk about, or is there a way to generalize this?
Yeah, just react for this.
For the
third world. Yeah. For the third world, to me, I'm quite aware that it's not us that speak the language; it's the language that speaks us. Yeah, it's quite aware of that. So, to me, that's not really big principal questions. How we rephrase it. It's now the third world is a metaphor. To highlight the situation, the feeling that people have, or I have, or we have for all this manifesto. Those people who have been living in Central Asia, let's say, for all our lives, The more important thing is to show that yes, we have to find our connections with the global project, and as subjects of change, of move, and that was important to highlight. That whatever you call it, second world or third world, former East, in this situation, that socialist is that collapsed. So it's just a matter of language you find. You phrase
it. Okay, but then if it's a metaphor, that's something else in that respect. Because then what does it stand for? For being left behind, for being disconnected, for not having access, for not having funds, not having. Yeah,
for all this, for being. For becoming a periphery of the world, because we have to keep in mind the capitalism as a global macro, as a global system, as a world system, and once being it's competent, as part of the Soviet Union. Now Central Asian countries are the periphery of the world. That's, to me, these practical things, these down-to-earth things are very important, It is important because you said, yes, the poverty, but, things, when I'm walking on the streets of Bishkek, which are not paved, you can break your legs. When you go to the hospital, and you actually cannot come, I would share that, that's, I'm thinking, I'm not looking very, very intellectual now, but talking very pragmatic things, but I think that they're probably now more important. I went to the hospital in Kyrgyzstan, and where people come and they break their legs or have some trauma, first aid. And I see how it operates. I see that the person comes, for instance, with the broken leg. He's being seen by the doctor, and then someone who he came with goes somewhere else to bring certain medicine, So then I saw that in this situation, you cannot be alone if something happened to you. You cannot rely on the social service and support. Because who will go and bring that medicine to you if you happen to be, having no friend around, having no family? You see, it's not only
the system. It's a system doesn't provide.
So you see, it's not only that we gone in terms of infrastructure degradation. We went through an extreme privatization of life. We lost that legacy of welfare state or social solidarity, social security. That's basically scaring to me, because I live alone. I'm single. My family is not around. So if I think about getting ill, that's scary to me, because I cannot rely on the system. And that's only one case. So we have
can I say something?
Yeah.
It's, if to use your metaphor, welcome to the first world.
Yeah, so this first, third world, second, third world, these are very general metaphors. They don't describe everything. But this is what I want to say, is that the position of the, I put it in yes, the capitalism came to Central Asia in all its, and all post-Soviet areas, but Central Asia in particular, in all its most disgusting, ugly form. And I think because of the shock, maybe because of no or not enough intellectual resources, all our socialist legacy didn't become the buffer to protect us from this situation, and rather something else happened, that more archaic, patriarchal forms and modes of existence took place, So this is what because you have to have big family just to live in this world. That can always extend you a hand of support. People, if you want to have a children, you wouldn't think about having a kindergarten. You would rather think of having a mother or mother-in-law who can help you.
Yeah, it sounds very much like first world.
First world.
Yeah.
So,
but these are complex things, and I'm realizing the radical replacement of certain structures by the most ugly, cynical version of capitalism, and I think that's what indeed might feel like a third world, but I just fear that's the reality of around us at this moment. However, is there one particular art practice or sort of practices you would want to point out that reflected probably this particular change? It was almost an overnight change, or not?
I don't think that there was. I think that the whole body of works produced in the early 2000s, I think, and late 1990s and 2000, they formed this kind of reflexive archive of this shift.
So late? So it would be
so
a decade later?
A decade later. A decade later.
Why such a delay?
I think probably people needed time to, I think that people, yes, you're right, overnight people found themselves in a completely new environment. I like to bring this example of Yerbasen Melzibekov. His, part of his biography that he entered the art school late 1980s with a very cynical desire to learn how to sculpt the bustes of Lenin. Yes. Because this is what he thought would make him rich and bring money in the Soviet Union.
Rightly so.
Yeah, and when he finished the school, the Soviet Union didn't exist anymore, and his skill and his desire were not in demand anymore. So, see, you have to. There should be some time to understand this, to adapt, to basically sustain your living in a way. And that was not a unique situation for the artists. That was, in my own family, my mother and my grandfather, they had to completely change and reconsider their past and life in a very radical way. But that would be the only way to survive and to go through the 90s. So I don't think that situation pretty much differed for the artists, And then, of course, by the late 90s, I think this process that they start gaining more exposure, learning new media, entering the international scene. So that was the moment when they acquired the skill and the language. Yeah. But by that time, the trauma still didn't go away. It was just probably calm down, but didn't go away. So early 2000 and late 1990s was, I think, quite a perfect timing to reflect on what happened in the core 90s. That's why I think we have the whole body of works by this generation of artists, mainly from Kazakhstan, less Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, like Ergol Melzibekov, Elena and Viktor Vorobyov, Muratbek Jumaliyev and Gulnara Ismailov from Kyrgyzstan, Vyacheslav Akhunov from Uzbekistan. When we have this whole set of works that, like I would name, let's say, two that to me are the, if I think about 90s, that would, what I would look for. Yeah. This is a work by Vorobyov's Bazaar. Mm-hmm. So basically an installation of photographs and objects and text from all the flea market, like many flea markets that were the common thing all over post-Soviet Union. That's exactly that image or that representation of the time that you would recognize yourself in. Because I do remember from my childhood all these flea markets that was so chaotic that would occupy just, the pavements all over the cities, because that was the only way people could survive, just bring this, stuff on the street and try to sell it. That wasn't, now it's trendy and fashionable, and in Moscow, for instance, to get to the flea market, something which is called flea market, you have to pay the entrance fee.
Oh.
But at that time it was just, and that's an amazing work, because that shows that the zeitgeist, I would say, that very moment, that very moment of time when people immediately understood that they are Soviet, because they see themselves in this objective, in the world of objects, that they can relate to, and they understand that this world doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's very tragic and traumatic. And another work is Trans-Siberian Amazon by Muratbek and Gulnara. That's, I think, also this woman singing the song. That's also the face of the time.
It's remarkable.
Very tragic. Yeah. So yes, I would. But you see, that was more of a therapy, I think, or on one hand, and on trying to preserve the time on the other, which was very important. It was a very important role, I think.
So not really coming to terms with new reality, but more
yeah,
for the loss of the other.
Yeah, coming for new reality, I think it was a further step. And I think this we can see in the practice of Yerbol, Medvedevkov. I think he actually, Yerbol and also maybe Said Atabekov, these two artists, they try to propose a kind of, to reflect already on the new identity and find a kind of steady soil, whatever you like it or not, but at least something, because when you deal with flea market and there is no steady soil for you, there is no steady ground for you. It's just, but what for instance Yerbol Medvedevkov proposes, that's exactly what you say. It's a cynical shift from from all the cynicism of the previous system into the cynicism of the new system. Yeah, because that's quite true. I mean, because if you look at Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, we have the same elites running the country, having before, having the control of the resources, basically privatizing the country, making its own rent, basically, because you cannot say that it's an industrial capitalism in its ontology. It's rent, rent for natural resources for anything that country can offer, and this rent is controlled by the group of people, by that elite that was already in power in 1989. And even if you have some personal shifts of personalities, that doesn't change.
We don't talk about individual countries, huh? We talk about the region. How real is this? Is this a projection? Is that really something like kind of fluent dialogue, conversation, exchange within the region?
You see, I think it's partly my narrative, because I was born in Tajikistan, in Dushanbe.
You studied in Russia.
Yeah, then I moved, and then I lived in Moscow. Now I'm in Bishkek. So I can't really talk on behalf of, and I'm not being, so to say, that's also a problem, and that's also a legacy I have to be saying. I'm not Tajik or Kyrgyz by ethnicity, So I'm in a more.
But you don't see yourself as a Central Asian intellectual either. Or do you?
I don't know. It's again. You see, we. Of course, I don't know how legitimate it is to talk on behalf of Central Asia. It is.
It is a construction.
It's a construction.
It's very different countries.
Yeah. This is what we try to reflect in our project about Central Asia Pavilion, actually.
In Venice.
In Venice, yeah, because we had to
Lingua franca.
Lingua franca, frankly, because we had to talk on behalf of Central Asia, having very different connections to Central Asia. Let's say, MHC was as a curatorial team, but I think that's also legacy of the 20th century to talk on behalf of the region. And here I make a cautious choice to talk on behalf of this construction rather than the individual countries. Yeah. So I'm aware of all the complications and all the differences. You can pick up any country and you would find in nature with the extreme that you would not find in any other. You would find extreme poverty in Kyrgyzstan, for instance. Yeah, the extreme Islamization in Tajikistan. All these things, they're so different. Indeed. Yeah, but at the same time, I think this is also a pragmatic moment. I think this is the time of choices. This is that we forgot or have been forgotten during euphoria of postmodernism. We thought that we are free from making any choice, or we can change, we can make choices daily, so there is no any choice after all. I think we are back to the time of choices, So I choose to talk on behalf of Central Asia rather than on Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, or Tajikistan. I think that's
quite an important statement you're making, being back to the time of choices. Speaking of which, from the conversations we've had, there are these two things I want to come back to, and that's the combination of what you call art pragmatism and radical imagination. Maybe you want to touch on each of them individually and then try to figure out how can they be weaved together as a kind of potentiality, how we can reconfigure this field that we never managed to define in detail. The field that we attend to as a field of art that for both you and I think functions as a bridge to something much larger, much more important, of much larger significance. But back to these two terms, like art pragmatism and radical imagination. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, they come in consequence, because first was art pragmatism, and I think that it was Zhmeyevsky who talked a lot about that, elaborated that.
In the last Berlin Biennale.
And before, in this...
Does he use the term art pragmatism?
Yes, I think this is what... Yeah, art pragmatism, and also in this applied social arts manifesto, and to think of art as the terrain for pragmatic moves, solutions, actions. I understand it very, very basically that that by what we do, we have to produce something that is meaningful, as you said, outside of art system. I think it's important also consciousness that we have to have in art, because we talk now, and that's not our small talk over the wine. That's our work. We are privileged to have our work as talking and discussing. Mm-hmm. So I would like to see that out of all these talks and moves that seem to be privileged to the majority of the people outside of the art system, we get something pragmatic, but pragmatic in the sense that that empowers something outside of art, that can produce change and impact
What could that be? Just an example.
An example, that could be an idea, and that could be a thing. For instance, we talked a lot about Yair Bartana's project and Europe will be started, or this Jewish Renaissance movement in Poland. So, for instance, coming up with the Congress resolution and with concrete steps like that, recommendations like Poland can return the citizenship to all the immigrants. That's to me a sign of pragmatism. And it doesn't mean that it will be implemented tomorrow, but it is something that is implementable, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that art should come up with something that is possibly implementable, employed, I don't know, accommodated, something that can be taken into use by people groups that are outside of art. So this can be either implemented by this Congress itself, if it turns into political power, as I can imagine, or it can be, you know, borrowed by another political power, or any activist group can promote and have other means to implement it, you know.
But is that different from radical imagination?
It is different from radical imagination.
So what is radical imagination?
See, radical imagination is something that confronts radically with the common sense. Because to me the common sense is the logic of capitalism now. You know? In this sense I would be, maybe not original, I would be follow of Zizek and his understanding of ideology. That ideology that is not seen, but it doesn't mean that it is not present. The ideology of common sense. When we don't question our circumstances, we take them for granted, and we think, like the phrase that what Georgy once put as that we live in the time when we can imagine everything but world without capitalism or world without money. You know, but it's like sometimes people ask, okay, we cannot predict future. I say, no, we can. I know that for tomorrow and the day after tomorrow I will have to pay money in the shop. Why? That's quite a predictable future, you know. So we cannot imagine the world without money, without capitalism, without competition, without private property. So, and not only because because it's our common sense as well, because
But I can imagine the world without money. That's how I was brought up. So I can imagine. Is it practicable? I don't think so, but I can imagine. Is that radical imagination, or is it something else?
I think radical imagination with pragmatism. I think that we have to confront the common sense in the radical way, and out of this confrontation, we have to come up with some pragmatic outcome, you know. So
they need to go hand in hand.
Yes. So again, following with this example of Yair Bartana, it is radical imagination to me to come up with a proposal that Jews return to Poland. You know, it's radical because there are many. Because yes, it's an epic theme, as you said. It's a world's trauma, etc. You know, and it is and the way, of course, it is expressed artistically, aesthetically, it's also, you know, I think it's radical to imagine Jews learning Polish from Hebrew, you know, to put all this upside down. But then making the next step, saying that Poland has to, you know, return the citizenship, something very pragmatic. This is how this radical imagination then is translated into some practical steps, some praxis.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that would be my very simple formula for art at the moment. I don't know. I would be interested to see more projects like that. I think this kind of consensus can probably be a driving force for art, you know. And I start looking at artworks through this perspective. Do they bear radical imagination and pragmatism together? And I start thinking, yes, there are people like that. on a different scale of their careers and opportunities that they are.
Do you want to share another?
I was thinking about at my age artist from St. Petersburg, like Olga Zhitlina. I particularly like her project, which is a kind of Monopoly, the table game, based on the life of migrants in Russia. It's called the Russia Land of Opportunities. She has an idea and she has a series of projects when she tries to create solidarity or manifestations of solidarity of migrants. This is the most stigmatized group in Russia. Yeah, absolutely deprived from any rights, any social support, and that is under constant cultural and social pressure. And hipsters, this is how they call them in Russia, this trendy young people, creative, involved in creative industries, Hipsters. Yeah, that's the term they use in Russia, in its own understanding. So to me, at first it looked a little bit superficial, but then thinking, I think yes, these two groups, one is culturally privileged, socially privileged,
the
hipsters. Another is culturally, socially stigmatized. Basically, have the same economic concerns and modes of operation, because this creative freelancer, as they like to call it, it's precarious worker, having no social security, no steady incomes, has to be employed by several employees at the same time, very often subject to cheat, The same conditions are for the labor migrant. Absolutely the same. You don't see the difference. Employed by many, no steady incomes, no social security, but stigmatized. On top of that, living but even in terms of living conditions, these hipsters can also live in rent an apartment for 5 people. This is what the migrants do.
When you talk about post-40s workers.
Post-40s workers, or precarious workers, So migrant and an artist, migrant and a designer share commonalities. So why can't they be? Why they should? And they have to realize this. These groups, and and there should be ground for solidarity, which would to overcome all the problems, economical and also cultural. So that's to me a radical confrontation with the common sense, something that doesn't happen to people right away, right immediately. Okay, what do I have in common with the migrant? I have nothing in common. We consume differently, we think differently, yes, but you work in the same way. Yeah, and probably you earn the same amount of money. Yes, you consume differently, but you...
If you earn and work,
as a migrant. Yeah, and but that wouldn't be enough if there was not that game that is very well informed, because it was not produced just by her as an artist, but in a cooperation with the human rights activist who is exposed in this situation, who know what happens. So they actually reproduce or reconstruct different scenarios for the migrant who comes to Russia. What happens to him? It's a tragic scenarios. And the medium of the game, you can put it in a trendy cafe where hipsters like to spend their money. That's one of the ways to educate people about the situation. But it has also another aspect. You can educate those who will be migrants in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan about the scenarios that they may face, and so that they take certain actions. Because, for instance, the game again very pragmatic. Because you make different moves, yeah. So if you make a move to obtain and legal registration, yeah, that would secure you in the police, yeah. If you make a move to go to the center to learn Russian, yeah, that would again help you to avoid certain situations.
But what does hipster gain from playing the game?
I think that for the hipsters and the more general, this group of people become norm. You know, it's the way we overcome the otherness. You know, in Russia, it's a very xenophobic society. Very, I don't know if I know any other.
I do.
You do?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that sound. So, and the migrant now, the word Tajik, it's to name an immigrant, and it's to name the worst of the person. You know, someone who is dirty, someone who is stupid, who doesn't speak the language. This is Tajik. You know, that's awful. So, and I think that game, it's one of the most striking attempts to overcome this otherness that I saw.
That's good.
Yeah.
To conclude, what's your next project? What is that you're investing your mind into at this moment?
I mean, it's stuck. We are thinking about several things at the time, which probably would be united by this idea of pragmatism and radical imagination. But we want to go on a deep research about 1920s and 1930s, with research in the archives, libraries in Kyrgyzstan and in Uzbekistan, and we hope that it will be resulted in a publication which will be broader than just about this. We think that it's time to start thinking about future for Central Asia as well. So we want to come up with a reader which would basically which we hope will be a reader of imagination. So we hope to arrive at that. And we also start a more productive project with one of our fellows, because we have a fellowship program in Stab. That will be an animation studio. We call it Workshop of Critical Animation.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we want to make it also to serve radical imagination in the pragmatic way. So we hope that this workshop will produce animation movies that can be employed in very practical work of activist organizations, in advocation, but at the same time it would send the message of radical imagination, imagining the world otherwise.
There you go.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I hope it will be interesting to anyone.